look around, the more connected our world becomes, the more people seem to think the same thoughts, repeat the same slogans, cancel the same strangers online, and follow the same viral trends without question. Why does it feel like true individuality is on the verge of extinction? Is this progress or mass hypnosis? Ask yourself, have you ever hesitated to post a controversial opinion, worried about the wave of backlash from the internet mob? Have you ever silenced your own doubts just to avoid standing out in your group, your workplace, or your family? Maybe you have. Maybe you've seen what happens to the outcast. They get exiled, cancelled, or even erased from the conversation entirely. Nietzsche warned us about this long before cancel culture or AI-powered echo chambers. He wrote, "Insanity in individuals is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." Isn't that what we see everywhere today? Collective madness disguised as virtue? Every week there's a new social media witch hunt, a new trend demanding absolute conformity, a new villain to attack or idol to worship. The algorithms know our tribal instincts better than we do. They push us to join the crowd, to echo what is safe, to sacrifice our doubts and questions for likes, retweets, or a sense of belonging. But here's a question for you right now. Have you ever felt pressured to agree with something you secretly disagreed with, just to fit in? If so, drop a comment below. What was the moment and how did it make you feel? If you've witnessed online mob mentality or groupthink in your own life, share your story. The more we talk about these experiences, the more we reveal how deep this herd instinct runs. Nietzsche called it slave morality, the surrender of your own judgment for the comfort of the herd. But are you willing to pay that price forever? Or do you still believe there's value in thinking for yourself, even if it means standing alone? Let's hear from you in the comments. Have you ever paid the price for being different? Or do you think conformity is sometimes necessary? Debate below. We live in an age that promises absolute individuality, yet delivers an invisible, massive collective. Every platform, every newsfeed, every community whispers the same lie. You are unique because you choose. But look deeper. Is it really your choice? Or a carefully engineered illusion? Why is it that the more transparent our information becomes, the more we feel pressured to think, speak, and even feel like everyone else? Why does the dream of self-expression end up producing a world of copies, not originals? In the age of endless options, why do most people still make the same choices? Does anyone truly dare to stand alone? Or have we all become actors in a play written by the crowd? Nietzsche warned that modern society is not a celebration of individuality, but a subtle machinery of conformity, one that punishes the outlier, the thinker, the rebel. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Have you ever caught yourself agreeing with something just because it was the popular opinion? Have you ever deleted a post, softened a comment, or stayed silent to avoid the judgment of the many? Share your answer in the comments, yes or no, and tell us about that moment. Do you think social media brings out your real voice or just your safest one? Vote below. What's the biggest price you've paid for trying to be yourself? The more honest you are, the more you realize you are not alone. In this chapter, we'll expose the silent, unspoken forces that drive us to surrender our individuality. Are you ready to see the collective for what it really is? And to ask yourself, if you still dare to be different, why do so many people fear standing out, even when everyone claims to celebrate originality? The answer lies deeper than culture. It's written into our biology. For most of human history, belonging to the group was a matter of life or death. In the wild, the lone outsider starved, froze, or was hunted down. The tribe meant protection, the group meant survival. Our brains evolved not for independence but for acceptance. That's why you feel a rush of comfort when you blend in, and a stab of anxiety when you sense disapproval. Evolution trained us to fear exclusion more than almost anything else. But here's the twist. That ancient survival instinct didn't disappear with civilization. It just changed its face. In the village square, conformity kept you safe from gossip and exile. Today, it's the digital mob, the viral trend, the unspoken rules of every online and offline group. Is it any surprise that social media algorithms reward sameness, amplify outrage, and punish dissent? The more visible you become, the more exposed you are to the new tribe's judgment. A judgment that can be global, permanent, and ruthless. Do you ever wonder why you sometimes feel a strange relief when you agree with the crowd, even if your gut says otherwise? Have you noticed that people you know, maybe even you, start to echo the same phrases, chase the same trends, and fear the same threats, just to avoid being singled out? This is what psychologists call groupthink, but Nietzsche named it long before. The herd instinct's the force that paralyzes independent thought, making collective comfort seem more important than truth itself. Let's get real. When was the last time you changed your mind? Not because you were convinced, but because you wanted to avoid conflict. Be honest and comment your story below. What's the biggest lie you ever told just to fit in? Have you ever seen a friend, family member, or co-worker betray themselves to keep peace in the group? Share the moment. The more we open up about these experiences, the more we see the invisible chains that bind us all. Nietzsche believed the greatest danger to the self is not outside oppression, but inner surrender, when you trade your judgment for belonging. Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule. In today's world, this collective numbness is everywhere. We mistake popularity for truth, viral for valuable, and agreement for wisdom. The herd doesn't just want you to join, it wants you to disappear into it, to forget you ever had your own voice. Have you ever looked back at a group you belonged to and wondered, was that really me or just the mask I wore? If yes, write yes in the comments and tell us what woke you up. If not, do you think it's possible to live in society without ever losing yourself? Vote below. The truth is, from the Stone Age to the digital age, the urge to belong has always shaped human nature. But now the stakes are higher. The tribe is billion strong, and the cost of dissent can be instant, global, and brutal. In this chapter, we're not just exposing the psychology of the herd, we're asking whether you have the courage to resist it. Will you let ancient instincts make your decisions, or will you risk standing alone for the truth you believe in? Let us know your answer below, because every honest voice makes the herd just a little less powerful. To understand why individuality is so fragile in the modern world, we must go straight to one of Nietzsche's most radical and most misunderstood ideas. The battle between slave morality, the herd, or sheep morality, and master morality. These are not just abstract labels, they are the hidden engines of every value system in history. So, what exactly is herd morality? It's a code designed by the weak for the weak, a set of values that idolize obedience, humility, equality, and safety above all else. To Nietzsche, these are not virtues, they are survival strategies. In a world where the majority feels powerless, morality becomes a weapon of the many against the few. Be modest, be humble, don't stand out, don't question. These commands are repeated not to inspire greatness, but to pull down anyone who dares to rise above the crowd. The herd praises self-sacrifice, calls ambition, arrogance, and brands any form of rebellion as a sin. Does this sound familiar? Look at how today's societies often reward conformity with acceptance and punish originality with isolation or ridicule. Have you ever been told not to rock the boat, not to make things difficult, or to just fit in for your own good? Share your moment below. Do you think these warnings are meant to protect you or to control you? Vote and discuss, but Nietzsche believed there is another path. The master morality, the code of the strong and the creators. Where the herd exalts obedience, the master values self-confidence. Where the crowd preaches sameness, the master celebrates difference. The master does not ask what is allowed, but what is possible. The noble soul has reverence for itself. In this morality, good is what springs from inner strength, courage, innovation, risk, even defiance. The master creates values, while the herd only receives them. Nietzsche was not glorifying cruelty or selfishness. He was warning that the loss of self-creation is the real tragedy of mass society. In his words, he who cannot command himself must obey. Think about the inventors, the artists, the rebels. Every breakthrough comes from someone who refused to play by the old rules. Yet history shows us the crowd almost always turns on those who challenge it. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Why do you think the greatest creators are so often the most hated, misunderstood, or lonely? Now ask yourself, why does herd morality kill creativity? Because it demands you suppress your instincts, your desires, your unique vision, all for the sake of belonging. It turns the pursuit of excellence into a threat and labels boldness as danger. It makes people fear their own potential. How many brilliant ideas never saw daylight because someone was afraid to be too much, too different, or too ambitious? Have you ever censored your creativity just to avoid attention? Share your story below. The world needs to know, what is the real price of blending in? Here's where it gets truly dangerous. In the modern age, herd morality wears new masks. We see fake master morality everywhere. People who think they are rebels but are simply following a different herd. Social media is full of self-proclaimed outsiders, rule breakers, and iconoclasts, all echoing the same edgy slogans, all desperate for validation from the same crowd. Are you really a rebel if your rebellion is just another trend? Are you truly thinking for yourself or just imitating the loudest voices? Nietzsche warned, the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in high esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. In the end, the herd is not just the crowd outside. It's the part of you that wants to be liked more than to be true. So here's a direct question. Do you see more real creators or more fake rebels in today's world? Drop your answer below. Have you ever realized that your so-called rebellion was just another form of conformity? Tell us about the moment you woke up. Maybe you've seen people attack anyone who's truly different, even as they call themselves open-minded. If so, what was the most extreme example? Comment below and let's see how far herd morality really goes. Nietzsche's challenge to us is simple but brutal. Will you let the herd define your values, or will you dare to create your own? Do you believe the price of real individuality is worth paying? Vote and debate below, because only through conflict does the truth become clear. You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist. In the age of mass opinion, the rarest act is to truly think for yourself. Are you ready to try? Why does every group, no matter how open-minded it claims to be, instinctively turn against the outsider? The answer lies in the deep structure of group identity. For any collective to feel safe, it must draw boundaries between us and them, between normal and strange, loyal and dangerous. The presence of an outlier is always a silent threat. It raises uncomfortable questions, challenges unspoken rules, and reminds the herd that their unity is more fragile than they want to admit. Psychologists call this in-group/out-group bias. But Nietzsche saw something even darker. He believed the group's greatest fear is not violence from without, but difference from within. The surest way to make enemies is to excel, he wrote. The most creative, honest, or simply different people are always the ones most likely to be attacked, not because they are wrong, but because they show that conformity is a choice, not a law. Think about history, from the medieval witch hunts to the Inquisition, from the burning of heretics to the blacklisting of artists and scientists. Every era invents its own rituals of exclusion. What were the witch trials if not a desperate attempt by the crowd to purge what it could not understand? Why did Socrates have to die? Why did Galileo face house arrest? Even in our so-called modern world, the same logic plays out. Social media mobs, cancel culture, public shaming, online dogpiling. Have you ever seen someone get destroyed by an internet storm? Not for breaking the law, but for breaking the unspoken script? Share your example in the comments. Is it possible that the crowd's thirst for justice is often just a mask for its fear of being challenged? Look closer to home. Schoolyard bullies always target the weird kid. Offices punish the nonconformist with exclusion, subtle mockery, or forced silence. Even families, those closest groups, can exile a member for refusing to play their assigned role. Ask yourself, have you ever watched someone be shamed or cast out simply for being different? Or have you been that person? If so, write yes and share the story. How did it change your view of groups and belonging? Nietzsche called this the destiny of the minority, the fate of those who refuse to trade their truth for acceptance. He wrote, "To live alone, one must be an animal or a god," says Aristotle. Nietzsche forgot to add, or both. For Nietzsche, the few who stand apart are not failures or outcasts, but pioneers, the ones who show others that another way is possible. But he also warned, this path is always lonely and almost always painful. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. So here's the real question. Is it worth being cast out, mocked, or attacked to remain true to yourself? Would you rather be loved for being fake or hated for being real? Vote below and explain your choice. If you've ever paid the price for difference or watched it happen, tell your story in the comments. The more we share these moments, the less power the herd has over each of us. As you think about your own experience, ask, is the group's embrace ever truly safe, or does it always come with invisible chains? Nietzsche believed that only those who risk standing alone can ever become truly free. Are you willing to risk it? Why is true independence so painful? Because every step you take away from the crowd is a step into loneliness, into the unknown. The moment you choose your own path, you lose the comfort of the herd's embrace and become, for a while, an exile. This is not just a feeling. It is the price every awakened soul pays. Evolution built us to crave company, to find safety in numbers, to seek the warmth of shared rituals and common dreams. But Nietzsche saw what most never dare to admit. Growth demands separation. He who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying. The birth of the self begins in isolation, not applause. That's why every creator, every thinker, every true rebel spends years in the wilderness, doubted, mocked, or forgotten before the world catches up, if it ever does. Is loneliness a sign of failure or the beginning of something higher? Nietzsche was mercilessly honest. You will be misunderstood, sometimes hated, sometimes broken. But no one who has ever become themselves did so by consensus. Is this price worth it? Would you trade temporary acceptance for lasting authenticity? Share your answer below. Have you ever chosen loneliness over belonging? And did it make you stronger or just hurt more? Tell us. The more we break the silence around this pain, the less power it has to trap us. Nietzsche's ultimate verdict is both terrifying and liberating. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Only in the darkness of solitude do we see the outlines of our true potential. Do you believe loneliness is necessary for real growth? Or do you think it's possible to awaken within the group? Vote below and debate. As we close this chapter, remember, the herd will always offer comfort, but never freedom. The world needs more who dare to be alone, and in doing so, show others the way out. Most people believe life is about survival, comfort, maybe even happiness. But Nietzsche shattered this illusion. He saw that beneath every action, every ambition, every relationship, every so-called virtue, there pulses a deeper, more unsettling force, the will to power. This is not just a thirst for domination, it's a silent drive to expand, to influence, to transcend our limits. Every living thing, Nietzsche wrote, seeks above all to discharge its strength, not merely to exist, but to impose itself, to shape its world. Survival is the baseline. True life is the struggle to overcome. That's why even the simplest organism, when threatened, fights back, not just for food or safety, but for the thrill of exerting its own will against resistance. Look at nature. The lion hunts not because it's hungry, but because it's a predator. The tree grows skyward, competing for sunlight, refusing to be overshadowed. And in humans, this will to power becomes infinitely more complex and often more dangerous. Desire, conflict, creation, all are expressions of this inner force. Why do we crave achievement? Why do we chase recognition, influence, or even love? Beneath every noble pursuit is the same raw drive to expand the borders of the self. Even creativity, the most celebrated human quality, begins as a rebellion against what already is, a refusal to accept the world as given. Nietzsche saw that great art, philosophy, and even morality are born not from humility, but from the fire of wanting more, being more, and refusing to be defined by others. He wrote, "What is good? All that heightens the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man." But here's the twist. This will to power is not always obvious. In modern life, it wears 1,000 masks. The family dinner table is a battleground for invisible influence. Who gets the last word? Who controls the narrative? Who is allowed to disagree? In every workplace, there's an unspoken hierarchy, a dance of alliances and subtle power plays. Online, the competitive for attention, likes, followers, viral moments becomes a new arena where everyone is fighting to matter, to win, to shape the conversation. Even so-called selfless acts can be power moves in disguise. The friend who gives advice to feel superior, the leader who preaches humility to command loyalty, the charity that craves public praise more than real impact. Have you ever stopped to ask, what's really driving my actions? Am I helping because I care, or because it makes me feel strong, important, needed? Are the good people around me truly selfless, or is their goodness a form of silent competition, a way to rise, to win, to dominate, just in a socially acceptable way? Nietzsche didn't condemn the will to power. He believed denying it is what leads to resentment, frustration, and hypocrisy. When societies try to kill the will to power, they only succeed in burying it, where it mutates, grows poisonous, and erupts as violence or despair. So here's the real challenge. Can you recognize the hidden power struggles in your own life, in your family, your job, your friendships, even your online persona? Have you ever caught yourself disguising ambition as kindness or competing for moral superiority? Comment below. Do you believe there's always a power dynamic beneath even the most good actions? Have you ever witnessed kindness used as a weapon, or morality as a mask for control? Share your story or vote yes or no. Nietzsche's verdict is harsh but honest. Where I found a living thing, there I found will to power. Denying this truth doesn't make you pure, it makes you blind. As we move forward, keep your eyes open for the subtle games that shape every human bond. The world is not divided between the powerful and the powerless. It's a battlefield where every living thing, every moment, is shaped by the struggle to assert, expand, and transform. Are you aware of your own will to power, or are you still pretending it doesn't exist? Let's discuss below. Because admitting the game is the first step to playing it well. Every leap in civilization, the abolition of slavery, the birth of democracy, the explosion of science, even the invention of art, began with someone who dared to say no to the world as it was. The rebel, the heretic, the radical thinker, these are the forces that ignite change. Think of Socrates, sentenced to death for corrupting the youth of Athens simply because he asked forbidden questions. Think of Galileo, silenced for daring to look at the stars and find a truth the church could not control. Think of civil rights leaders, suffragettes, dissidents under totalitarian regimes, or modern whistleblowers exposing corruption. Every era has its rebels, and every system resists them with all its might. Without these troublemakers, would we still live in darkness? Or would someone else eventually have taken the risk? But here's the uncomfortable truth. For every celebrated rebel who changed the world, countless others vanished without a trace, crushed by the systems they tried to challenge, betrayed by the crowds they hoped to free, or simply swallowed by the inertia of the masses. The story of civilization is not just the triumph of the individual, but the relentless push and pull between order and revolt, between the comfort of the herd and the vision of the outsider. As Nietzsche put it, the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Yet the world is not built by rebels alone. Every society also depends on the countless millions who keep things running, the so-called obedient, the law-abiding, the loyal majority. They build the roads, raise the children, enforce the laws, fill the offices, pay the bills. Without this stability, would anything function at all? If everyone was a rebel, would we collapse into chaos? Maybe the crowd in its stability protects us from the dangers of constant upheaval, but does it also smother the spark of innovation, the courage to dissent? Look at today's world. AI researchers fighting for ethical boundaries in a system obsessed with profit and progress, or online activists risking everything to expose injustice in authoritarian states. Look at the people who stand up to internet mobs, the creators who refuse to play safe, the whistleblowers who lose their jobs or freedom to speak the truth. Do they drive civilization forward, or do they pay the price for the rest of us to remain comfortable? Even the technologies we use, are they tools for liberation or new forms of conformity and control? But consider this. Some revolutions end up creating new tyrannies, some protests devolve into chaos, and sometimes the crowd uses the rebel as a mascot until the system absorbs or destroys them. Was Prometheus a hero for stealing fire from the gods, or a fool for suffering endless torment? Was Joan of Arc a martyr, or a victim of the herd's hysteria? Is the hacker who exposes government secrets a criminal or a savior? History never settles the question. So here's the challenge for you. Do you believe the world is changed by the few who rebel, or by the many who obey? Is it the spark of dissent that creates progress, or the foundation of order that sustains it? Vote in the comments. Type rebel if you believe in the power of defiance, or obedient if you see strength in unity. Why do you choose this side? Have you ever tried to challenge the status quo and faced backlash? Or were you the one who kept the peace when others rebelled? Share your story. Do you admire the troublemakers? Or do you secretly resent them for stirring up conflict? Can you name a time when a rebel made your life better or worse? The more honest our stories, the clearer this dilemma becomes. Nietzsche saw that both forces are needed, but warned that too much conformity breeds stagnation, while too much rebellion can destroy what little we've built. The glory and the tragedy of the rebel is that, even when they win, the world may never understand their sacrifice. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Which side are you on? Order or change? And is it possible for the world or for you to ever have both? Why do all systems, institutions, religions, and mainstream moral codes seem obsessed with taming the individual's will to power? To Nietzsche, it's because true individuality is a threat to every order ever built. The logic is simple. A crowd of compliant citizens is easy to manage, but a crowd of free spirits is uncontrollable. The state, the church, the school, even the modern corporation all need you to play your part and obey. They don't just want you to follow rules. They want to shape your desires, dull your instincts, and make you grateful for your own submission. Nietzsche called this the taming of man. The slow, systematic process of turning wild, creative beings into docile, predictable units. In his words, morality is the herd instinct in the individual. Why does the priest teach humility, obedience, and self-denial? Because a humble flock is less likely to rebel. Why does the school reward the well-behaved, punish the curious, and preach the virtue of fitting in? Because institutions fear the chaos of real freedom. Why do so many corporate cultures insist on teamwork, positivity, and alignment, even as they squeeze every drop of originality from their workers? Because dissent is bad for business, and the illusion of harmony keeps profits high. History is full of brutal examples. The church once burned heretics for the crime of thinking differently. Totalitarian regimes rewrite laws and morals, demanding total loyalty, crushing dissent in the name of national unity or public good. Even today, those who step out of line, whistleblowers, artists, protesters, are often ostracized, fired, or destroyed, not just by governments, but by companies, communities, and even family. The real genius of power is not in open violence, but in silent domestication, making you want what you're supposed to want, believe what you're told, and feel that any resistance is shameful or even evil. Nietzsche's great insight was that the deepest control is moral, not physical. He argued that our entire concept of good and evil is shaped by those who benefit from our obedience. God is dead, he declared, not as a celebration but as a warning. Without questioning who sets the rules, we become slaves to systems we never chose. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche called for a new kind of morality, not one inherited from priests and politicians, but one forged by each person's own creative power. He challenged us to move beyond good and evil, to ask not what is permitted, but what is possible. Think about your own life. Have you ever felt yourself shrink to fit someone else's expectation? Have you ever hidden your true thoughts, stifled your own drive, or pretended to agree just to avoid trouble? That's what Nietzsche meant by the castration of the will. The subtle daily betrayals that add up to a lifetime of missed potential. Is there a system, school, workplace, religious community, government that you feel most powerfully tames or drains people's energy? Share your experience below. Which do you think does the most damage? Law, faith, or culture? History offers moments of resistance. The Protestant Reformation, revolutions against kings and tyrants, waves of protest and reform. But every victory is followed by new systems eager to repeat the process. Even progressive organizations develop new taboos, new ways to silence dissent, new rituals of loyalty. Nietzsche's lesson is stark. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. Every attempt to reform the world must guard against the temptation to tame others in turn. So here's the question for you. Do you feel free to speak and act as you truly are? Or are there invisible lines you know never to cross? What is the most castrating system you've ever experienced? School, work, religion, or something else? Comment below and explain. Have you ever tried to break free? And if so, what was the price? The more honest our stories, the harder it is for the herd to keep us silent. We are told we live in the age of ultimate freedom. Social media platforms, open forums, viral movements. Everywhere you look, the internet sells itself as a digital democracy, where every voice matters and power is finally shared. But is this really freedom, or a new form of invisible control? In the past, authority wore a uniform or a crown. Now, it hides behind algorithms, popularity metrics, the cult of engagement. Anyone can go viral, become a micro-celebrity, seize a piece of the spotlight, but with every click, like, and retweet, we feed systems designed not to empower us, but to keep us hooked, divided, and easy to manage. The dream of online power is seductive, but the reality is that the crowd decides who rises and who falls. Trends shift in an instant, and today's hero is tomorrow's villain. The democracy of the web is not a marketplace of free spirits, but a gladiator pit where the rules are written by those who own the platform and enforced by the mob. Here's the paradox. The more we chase visibility and influence, the less real power we possess. Our opinions become performances, our relationships become numbers, and our sense of self-worth becomes a commodity to be liked, shared, and consumed. Nietzsche saw the seeds of this crisis long before the first smartphone. He warned that when the will to power loses its creative edge, it turns self-destructive. Who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. But in the end, he who fights too long against monsters becomes a monster himself. When everyone becomes a player in the game of attention, the desire to stand out mutates into the terror of being forgotten. The crowd, once a source of safety, becomes a source of endless judgment, a never-ending competition for validation that leaves us emptier with every victory. Have you ever noticed how the pursuit of more followers, more success, more recognition never really satisfies? Instead, it breeds anxiety, envy, and burnout. The digital world promises you a voice, but punishes any voice that dares to step out of line. The more you crave the crowd's approval, the more you lose your own center. Nietzsche would say this is the will to power eating itself. When creation gives way to competition, and freedom gives way to conformity, power becomes a trap, not a triumph. Are we building new empires of individuality, or just new cages of collective desire? Here's where Nietzsche's prophecy turns chilling. All great things bring about their own destruction through an act of self-overcoming. The systems we invent to liberate ourselves end up enslaving us in new, more subtle ways. The will to power, unexamined, becomes the will to emptiness, a hunger that no amount of status or attention can ever satisfy. We are left with the appearance of freedom, but the reality of deeper dependence. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever chased power, influence, or popularity, online or off, and ended up feeling more lost or hollow than before? What did you gain, and what did you lose? Share your story in the comments. Do you believe real power is even possible in the modern world? Or is it just another illusion? The more we reveal these hidden traps, the closer we come to reclaiming ourselves from the game. Few philosophical ideas are as misunderstood or as dangerous as Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman or superman. Popular culture twists it into a caricature of a ruthless dictator, a cold-blooded conqueror, or even a comic book hero. But Nietzsche's original vision is far more radical and far more human. The Übermensch is not a tyrant who dominates others, but a creator who masters himself. He's not obsessed with power for its own sake, but with the courage to invent new values, to write his own story in a world stripped of all inherited meaning. In Nietzsche's words, "The Übermensch shall be the meaning of the earth." What does this mean? It means that when God is dead, when old authorities, religious dogmas, and traditional morals have lost their force, someone must step in and build something new. The Übermensch is the one who dares to ask, if all the rules are just stories, what kind of story will I create for myself? He is the architect of his own purpose, the poet of his own morality, the artist of his own life. This is not about brute force or social status. It is about self-overcoming, the endless struggle to outgrow your limitations, to kill the coward within, to become your own standard. But if the Übermensch is the summit of human potential, Nietzsche gives us his dark opposite, the last man. The last man is content with comfort, safety, and shallow pleasures. He avoids pain, flees from risk, and laughs at anyone who still dreams of greatness. "We have invented happiness," he declares, as he settles for mediocrity and numb satisfaction. So he settles for mediocrity and numb satisfaction. The last man is everywhere in modern society. He is the satisfied consumer, the eternal spectator, the proud conformist who despises all who would disrupt his peace. If the Übermensch is the builder of new worlds, the last man is the guardian of stagnation, the enemy of all true growth. Nietzsche's warning is clear. Man is a rope stretched between animal and Übermensch, a rope over an abyss. Most people never risk the crossing. They cling to the easy life, the herd, the rules handed down by others. Only a few dare to step into the void and make something new. Ask yourself, which path do you see more often in the world around you? Do you see people striving to become creators of value or settling for passive consumption? Are you more tempted by the comfort of the herd or the terror and thrill of real freedom? The Übermensch is not a distant fantasy or a monster from the past. He is a challenge, a question posed to every individual. Will you choose your own purpose or let the world choose for you? This choice is not made once, but every day, in every act of courage, every refusal to give up, every moment you decide to become more than you were yesterday. So here's where you come in. What does Übermensch mean to you? Is it a dangerous fantasy, an inspiring ideal, or something else? Do you know anyone in real life who comes close to this standard? A person who truly creates their own values regardless of the crowd? Share your thoughts, your doubts, your stories in the comments. Who is your personal model of self-mastery or creative living? Or do you think the whole idea is impossible in today's world? Debate below. The more we talk honestly about what being more really means, the closer we come to discovering the Übermensch within ourselves. If you want to understand what holds most people back, not just from greatness, but from even dreaming of it, you must grasp the engine behind slave morality. Nietzsche's most shocking insight is that morality is not some universal truth handed down from the heavens, but a weapon forged in the heat of resentment. Slave morality is born wherever the weak must live in the shadow of the strong. Instead of celebrating power, creativity, or boldness, it reverses the values of the powerful and brands them as evil. Ambition becomes arrogance, self-assertion becomes selfishness, independence becomes coldness. Meanwhile, what remains for the weak? Meekness, obedience, pity, patience, humility, and above all, suffering. Suffering is transformed into a badge of honor, and the sufferer becomes good, simply for enduring what the powerful inflict. Thus, in the world of slave morality, the victim becomes the hero, and those who stand tall must apologize for their very existence. But Nietzsche's critique is not just a matter of ancient history or medieval religion. He saw that the logic of slave morality infects every modern society, often under the cover of justice, fairness, or equality. In our world, the story of the victim is the ultimate moral trump card. Whoever claims greater injury, whoever shouts their pain loudest, commands attention, sympathy, and authority. This is not always a conscious manipulation. Many really do suffer, and suffering must be honored. But Nietzsche warns that when pain becomes currency, people will compete to be seen as the most wounded. Today, social media amplifies this pattern to a fever pitch. Outrage is monetized, victimhood is viral. Call-out culture and cancel culture parade as moral crusades, but too often become bloodless witch hunts, fueled by envy and the thrill of power through outrage. In this world, it is not the most virtuous who rise, but the most offended, the best at mobilizing group guilt and moral panic. Slave morality thrives on moral blackmail, on the unspoken rule that to question a victim's narrative is itself a crime, and that the good person is always the one who sides with the aggrieved, never the accused. This is why groupthink takes hold so quickly, why mobs form overnight to punish the latest villain, and why so few people risk defending nuance or due process. Straight morality depends on the unity of the many, on group consensus, collective outreach, and the soothing lie that we are all on the side of the good. But what happens when this herd defines goodness only as compliance and confession, never as courage or creativity? Ask yourself, do you ever feel a quiet satisfaction when you see the mighty brought low or the successful shamed for their flaws? Do you hesitate to voice an unpopular opinion, not because it is wrong, but because you fear the mob's wrath? Have you ever gone along with a moral crusade that didn't feel quite right, just because everyone else was doing it? This is the shadow of slave morality inside you, the seed of resentment, fear, and the secret relief that comes from seeing others fall. Nietzsche called this the spirit of revenge, the core of all systems that seek to drag down what is great, rather than to lift up what is weak. But the face of slave morality is not always vengeful. Sometimes it wears the mask of compassion, humility, or even love. It says, "Who are you to judge?" not in the name of justice, but to avoid responsibility and honest self-assessment. It says, "We're all equal," but uses equality to punish anyone who dares to excel, create, or challenge the norm. It values safety over truth, comfort over risk, and agreement over discovery. These values are seductive, especially when we feel powerless. They offer the comfort of belonging, the warmth of shared victimhood, and the thrill of joining a just cause. But they also sap the will to strive, to dare, and to become more. So, how do you recognize the traces of slave morality within yourself? Nietzsche says to look for signs of self-doubt, envy, or the habit of blaming others for your unhappiness. Do you secretly resent those who succeed, even if you admire them? Do you often feel the world is unfair to you, that your virtues go unnoticed, that your potential is wasted because of others? Do you prefer the safety of following rules to the terror of making your own? Slave morality grows wherever people are afraid to take responsibility for their desires, or where they outsource their judgment to the group. It lives in the stories we tell ourselves. If only others would change, my life would be better. It thrives in every excuse, every rationalization, every refusal to risk failure for the sake of something new. Escaping slave morality is no easy feat. It requires ruthless honesty, the willingness to see the roots of resentment in your own soul and to admit that comfort is not the same as virtue. Nietzsche proposes a path not of obedience, but of self-overcoming. The first step is self-examination, asking yourself, where am I blaming others instead of changing myself? The next is to train your will, to do what frightens you, to act even when the group disapproves, to accept loneliness as the cost of integrity. Finally, it means breaking, sometimes violently, with the roles and stories that kept you safe but small. This process is not comfortable. Nietzsche wrote, "You must be willing to burn in your own flame." How could you become new if you had not first become ashes? What does this look like in practice? Sometimes it's leaving a relationship or community that demands your silence. Sometimes it's speaking an unpopular truth and living with the consequences. Sometimes it's the quiet revolution of refusing to let your pain define you, or the daily struggle to create instead of complain. Every act of self-assertion, every risk taken in the name of something higher is a blow against the logic of the herd. And every time you choose growth over resentment, you inch closer to becoming the creator of your own life. So here's my question for you. Have you ever experienced what you now recognize as slave morality in yourself or others? Was there a moment, a betrayal, an awakening, a crisis that made you question the virtue of blind obedience or reflexive goodness? What did it take to begin breaking free? Share your story in the comments, or just answer yes or no. Do you believe it's possible to escape the gravity of group morality? Or do you think it's an illusion to even try? The more we talk about the chains we wear, the more likely we are to find the key. Remember, Nietzsche's warning is not that morality itself is evil, but that unexamined morality used to keep us small, silent, and resentful, is the real enemy of human greatness. True strength is not found in comfort or consensus, but in the courage to become who you are, no matter what the herd demands. To rebel is almost by definition to become alone. History and experience agree. The first to question the crowd is the first to be exiled. But why is loneliness the fate of the awakened? Nietzsche, perhaps more than any other thinker, understood that true rebellion is not just a social gesture, but a personal ordeal, a journey through three kinds of isolation. First, there is social loneliness, the distance from groups, tribes, and institutions that no longer recognize you as one of their own. The price for speaking a new truth, for refusing to play a given role, is often exile from family, community, or career. Van Gogh painted in hunger and despair, ignored and ridiculed by the world that now worships his genius. Franz Kafka lived and wrote in near total solitude, misunderstood even by his closest friends. Steve Jobs, at the height of his vision, was thrown out of the very company he created, betrayed for seeing a future others could not. Today, countless creators, activists, and thinkers know what it means to lose their place the moment they dare to change the game. Second, there is emotional loneliness, the loss of comfort, understanding, and shared feeling. For the rebel, even intimate relationships become fraught. How do you explain to those you love that you no longer fit their dreams or share their fears? The more you change, the harder it is to find anyone who truly sees you. The pain of difference can grow into bitterness or despair. Nietzsche's own life is a haunting example. His break with Wagner, his alienation from colleagues and friends, the love never returned, the descent into madness at the edge of brilliance. The rebel is not just cut off from others, he is often at war within himself. Third and deepest is intellectual loneliness, the agony of seeing what others refuse to see, of asking questions no one dares to answer, of bearing witness to a reality the world denies. This is the loneliness of the visionary and the heretic, the artist who paints the future, the coder who breaks the system, the philosopher who burns old gods. The group always fears the first to awaken, because the presence of the awakened exposes their sleep. To accept a rebel is to admit that the rules are not absolute, that anyone at any time can choose to walk away. Most would rather punish the exception than question the norm. So why endure this trial? Is loneliness a curse or the forge of greatness? Nietzsche would say both. One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. The pain of separation is real, but it is also the condition for real creation. The group rewards imitation and safety. The rebel must invent from nothing, building a new language, a new art, a new life. Nearly every breakthrough, artistic, scientific, or spiritual, was born in exile, in the silent years when the world looked away. The rebel is forced to become their own audience, their own friend, their own source of hope. Have you ever felt this kind of loneliness? Not just the absence of people, but the ache of being misunderstood, out of place, even punished for thinking differently? If so, comment yes and share your story. Or maybe you found your creativity sharpened by solitude, your vision strengthened by having no one to please but yourself. How do you see the link between loneliness and originality? Do you think great work is possible without isolation, or is it the necessary crucible of change? Debate below. Remember, to be alone is not always to be lost. Sometimes it is the price and the proof of finding your true path. The herd will always mock the one who leaves, but history is written by those who dared to walk out first. True creativity never begins in comfort. It is born from the refusal to accept the world as given, the courage to break with tradition, and the drive to make something out of nothing. Nietzsche saw the highest human act not in obedience, but in self-legislation. The capacity to invent new values, to set new standards, to become the author of your own destiny. The creative act for Nietzsche is always an act of negation, a no to the old world, to received opinion, to the voice of the herd inside your head. But it doesn't end with destruction. Creation means building a new order, not just for yourself, but for all who will come after. The Übermensch does not merely rebel. He constructs, he organizes, he affirms. He becomes the living proof that meaning can be made, not just inherited. Where does this power come from? Not from talent alone, and certainly not from social approval. It begins in the willingness to face emptiness, to stand alone when necessary, to doubt every dogma, even your own. It requires a strange optimism, the sense that even when everything around you says impossible, there is still something in you that says try. The true creator lives at the frontier, risking ridicule, failure, and exile for the chance to bring forth what has never existed. Nietzsche's self-overcoming is not a final destination, but a lifelong process. An ongoing struggle to surpass yesterday's self, to break out of every comfort zone, and to refuse the lullaby of conformity. Yet in today's world, creativity is more threatened than ever. We live in an age of endless imitation. Social media algorithms reward what is safe and familiar. Virality prizes repetition over originality, and pseudo-innovation becomes the norm. Every year brings new buzzwords, new disruptors, but how much is truly new, and how much is just old patterns in a new costume? True breakthrough, whether in art, technology, science, or philosophy, requires more than novelty. It demands the bravery to offend, to be misunderstood, to risk everything for the birth of something real. The internet is both a blessing and a curse. It connects creators, but also drowns them in a sea of sameness. It offers tools to everyone, but makes it harder than ever to stand apart. How then do you remain creative and independent in a world that rewards conformity and punishes dissent? Nietzsche would say, never outsource your judgment. Don't let the crowd, the trend, or even your own past achievements dictate what is possible. Question everything, especially the voices that promise comfort or acceptance. Surround yourself with challenge, not flattery. Find models who dared to be unpopular, who risked ridicule, poverty, or exile for the sake of their vision, and let their courage fuel your own. Remember that every truth is up for reinvention, and that the most dangerous thing you can do is surrender your power to define your life. So let's bring this back to you. Who is the creator you most admire? Someone who truly built new values, broke the mold, or refused to fit in? When did you first feel your own creativity ignite? Was it in a moment of crisis, rebellion, or solitude? Share your stories below, and let's celebrate not just the famous names, but the everyday acts of creation that shape our world. Do you believe true originality is still possible today? Or is everything just a remake? Debate, confess, inspire, because the more voices that dare to break the silence, the more hope there is for a future not yet written. Nietzsche's final challenge is for each of us to become the artist of our own life, to invent new answers, and to refuse every comfort that asks us to stop growing. The world may not understand, but history has always belonged to those who create, not just those who obey. How are entire societies led to believe in things that never happen, to worship ideas that are empty, to defend lies with their lives? The manipulation of the masses is not a new story. It's as old as civilization itself. In the fable of the emperor's new clothes, a whole city conspires in self-deception, afraid to speak the obvious truth for fear of being outcast. But in our time, the stakes are higher, and the mechanisms subtler. Power today manufactures facts, not with brute force, but with stories, images, and endless repetition. The age of the social network, the viral hashtag, and the algorithm has created a world where truth is less a discovery than a product, something crafted, packaged, and delivered to serve someone's interests. Think about how information moves in modern society. It isn't just released, it's curated. Editors, platforms, and influencers filter what is seen and what is silenced. The news you see is only a sliver of what happens. The rest is lost in the shadows, unseen and unremarked. This is the genius of modern power. By deciding what to amplify and what to ignore, it shapes the very boundaries of reality. Propaganda is no longer only the domain of governments. Every major company, political party, celebrity, and even AI system now fights for control over the narrative. In this battle, the loudest voices drown out the most truthful, and complexity is sacrificed for virality. Do you ever wonder why the same story appears on every channel at once? Why certain scandals explode while others vanish without a trace? Behind the scenes, teams of strategists and PR specialists wage invisible wars to set the agenda, manufacture consensus, and bury dissent. The tools of mass persuasion are sophisticated but simple. Spread, select, repeat. Information becomes truth, not because it is accurate, but because it is everywhere. Repetition is a powerful hypnotist. Studies in psychology show that even the most intelligent people start to believe what they hear most often, simply because it feels familiar. In the chaos of conflicting data, the brain prefers the comfort of agreement over the effort of skepticism. Algorithms turbocharge this process, flooding your feed with ideas you already agree with, locking you in echo chambers, and making dissent feel risky or absurd. The result is a landscape where truth is measured by popularity, not by evidence. Why do the wildest rumors and silliest conspiracies catch fire, while careful, nuanced analysis languishes in obscurity? Because the human mind craves certainty, drama, and a sense of belonging. Lies that flatter the tribe or stoke its fears will always spread faster than complicated, inconvenient realities. This is not just a failure of education, it's an ancient instinct. In the crowd, doubt is dangerous, and skepticism is lonely. The majority instinctively defends its myths, even when they are provably false. The greatest crimes of history, pogroms, witch hunts, genocides, began not with a tyrant, but with the silent consent of millions who wanted to believe the story, to be on the right side. Examples are everywhere. Governments rewrite history textbooks to erase their failures or glorify their rulers. Patriotic education is less about knowledge than about manufacturing loyalty. During times of war, propaganda ministries turn enemy civilians into monsters and tragedies into victories. In authoritarian regimes, a single leader's version of reality becomes law, and all dissenting voices are branded as liars or traitors. But even in free societies, the same pattern plays out. Media conglomerates filter stories through the lens of profit or ideology. Politicians deploy spin to control headlines. Tech giants adjust algorithms to suppress, promote, or simply disappear inconvenient facts. On the internet, manufactured reality is hypercharged. Viral challenges, fake news, and orchestrated outrage campaigns turn the global village into a battlefield of manipulated emotions. Look at how quickly misinformation spreads during crises. Pandemics, elections, international conflicts. One viral image out of conflict can shape the worldview of millions. Astroturfing operations create the illusion of mass support for ideas that have been engineered in boardrooms or war rooms. Bots, deepfakes, and meme armies manufacture trends, distort perception, and hijack genuine grassroots movements for profit or power. Do you remember a time when a story you knew was false suddenly became truth? Just because everyone around you repeated it? The effect is a form of collective hypnosis, groupthink on a global scale. When enough people believe or pretend to believe the lie, reality bends to fit the story. The majority rationality becomes a force more dangerous than any dictator because it lives inside us. Why do people cling to clearly false narratives? Because to question the story is to risk exile from the group, to become the lone child in the crowd, saying the emperor has no clothes. Most would rather go mad with the herd than be sane alone. Reflect on recent social media storms. A celebrity cancelled overnight, a viral outrage about a misunderstood event, a sudden shift in what is considered moral or true. How many times have you seen entire communities pivot in unison, denouncing yesterday's hero as today's villain, never pausing to ask who benefits, who profits, who pulls the strings? Every age has its manufactured truths, but our own era has perfected the machinery of myth. And yet, the responsibility is not only with the manipulators at the top, it is also with us, the crowd, who crave easy answers and a sense of certainty. Nietzsche warned that truths are illusions which we have forgotten are illusions. The real danger is not the powerful liar, but the willing believer. The millions who lend their voice, their outrage, and their votes to whatever story feels safest, most righteous, or most exciting in the moment. So here's my question for you. Have you ever caught yourself believing a story, political, cultural, personal, only to realize later it was manufactured, exaggerated, or simply false? What's the most popular opinion you once accepted, only to later discover it was propaganda, PR, or peer pressure? Share your experience in the comments. Do you think we can ever escape mass manipulation? Or is it just part of human nature? What manufactured truths do you see dominating today's world? The more we recognize these patterns, the less power they have over us. The first step to breaking the spell is daring to see the machinery at work and asking every day, whose story am I living in? Who writes the story of your life? Who decides which truths you're allowed to know? Which histories you are taught to believe, which voices echo in your mind. For Nietzsche, there is no such thing as absolute, objective truth. There are only perspectives, only the shifting sands of power and interpretation. There are no facts, only interpretations, he famously declared. In this view, every so-called truth is bound to the interests, anxieties, and ambitions of those who control the narrative. History is not a record of what happened, but a battleground where the victors carve their story into stone and erase their enemies from the record. From ancient empires chiseling triumphs on monuments to modern regimes scrubbing their failures from textbooks, the story is always the same. truth is manufactured by power. Look at any official version of history, and you will see the fingerprints of those who won. Battles are justified, atrocities excused, dissenters demonized or forgotten. When a new regime comes to power, the first order of business is to seize the means of memory, to rewrite the past, control the archives, silence the witnesses. In Nazi Germany, entire libraries were burned, and un-German books vanished from the shelves. In the Soviet Union, disgraced leaders were airbrushed out of photographs. Entire eras vanished from the curriculum. In today's world, patriotic education campaigns rewrite the story of nations, turning defeats into victories, failures into triumphs, and rebels into traitors. The past is not what happened, but what can be made useful, what can serve the needs of the present authority. This struggle for narrative control is not confined to authoritarian states. In every society, the power to define reality belongs to those who control the tools of communication. Media conglomerates, publishers, platforms, educational institutions. The curriculum you study in school is carefully chosen. Some chapters emphasized, others glossed over. Uncomfortable questions quietly ignored. Textbooks present history as a chain of logical events led by wise rulers and noble heroes. But whose wisdom? Whose heroism? Whose pain is left out? And whose voice is erased? Every syllabus is an act of selection, a map drawn by those who want you to see the world a certain way. Media magnifies this process 1,000-fold. News is filtered, edited, spun to fit the agenda of owners, advertisers, or government. What is not reported is often more important than what is. One story is splashed across every screen, while another vanishes. When capital controls the news, reality itself becomes a commodity. Attention is bought, stories are shaped, and public opinion becomes a resource to be mined, sold, and weaponized. In the digital age, this machinery is turbocharged. Algorithms decide what you see, bury dissent, and create the illusion of consensus. Trending topics are not always organic. They can be gamed, bought, or suppressed. Shadow banning can silence a voice without leaving a trace. And viral misinformation, whether planted by states, companies, or anonymous trolls, can reshape elections, incite violence, or topple reputations overnight. But Nietzsche's critique goes even deeper. He warns us that truth is always tangled up with power, that what passes for knowledge is often a reflection of the needs of those in charge. Every philosophy, he writes, is the confession of its author, a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir. This is perspectivism, the recognition that there is no God's eye view, no neutral ground, only a field of competing interpretation. Truth is not something you find, but something you make or have made for you. The greatest danger, Nietzsche warns, is to mistake someone else's story for your own, to live inside the prison of another's narrative without ever realizing it. Consider the battle over memory and meaning in our own times. In authoritarian countries, history is a weapon of control. The Tiananmen massacre, for example, is scrubbed from Chinese textbooks and censored from search engines. In Russia, laws ban criticism of the Great Patriotic War, and dissenters are labeled enemies of the people. But the West is not immune. Capital interests shape the news. Political parties rewrite their own scandals. Media bubbles divide societies into warring tribes, each with its own facts, heroes, and villains. Even your social media feed is curated to keep you loyal, angry, and distracted. Who, in this maze of stories, has the authority to declare what is real? This is the agony and the challenge of our age. On one hand, we are more connected than ever. On the other, we are more vulnerable to manipulation, echo chambers, and information wars. We are told we have freedom of information, but what we have is a torrent of noise, where the loudest voices or those with the deepest pockets shape the terrain. Real stories of suffering, resistance, or hope are often drowned by spectacle and spin. Every group claims to have the truth. Every group fears the loss of its narrative. In this chaos, personal judgment becomes both a burden and a necessity. So what can you do? Nietzsche's answer is not comfortable. Learn to see the power behind every truth, to question the motives of every narrative, to refuse the lazy comfort of being told what to think. Distrust all in whom the impulse to punish is powerful, he writes. They are people of a low sort, out of whom no great man can come. Resist the temptation to surrender your perspective for the safety of the group. History is not destiny, it is a battlefield. Every story you inherit is both a gift and a trap. So here is the challenge for you. Who do you think is truly qualified to define truth for the world, if anyone? Have you ever doubted a version of history, a news story, or a widely accepted fact that was taught to you? What made you question it? And what did you discover when you looked deeper? Share your experience in the comments. Do you think it's possible to ever know the real story? Or are we always trapped inside someone else's narrative? What received truths do you most want to challenge? The more we confront the machinery of story and power, the more we reclaim the right to write our own destinies. Remember, every time you question a dominant narrative, you risk exile, doubt, and loneliness. But you also open the door to genuine freedom. Truth is not what survives the test of power. It's what survives the test of your own courage to keep searching. Why is it that the most terrifying acts in human history, massacres, persecutions, purges, are so often committed not by monsters but by people convinced they are fighting for justice? Why does goodness so easily become a license for cruelty and righteousness a mask for collective violence? This question haunts every age. In the name of justice, armies have marched. Heretics have burned. Revolutions have devoured their own children. And millions have clicked share to unleash mobs on strangers. The most dangerous weapon is not hatred, but moral certainty. The belief that you, your group, your cause stand on the side of truth, and that all means are justified to defeat evil. History is full of these righteous horrors. The Crusades slaughtered entire cities in the name of God and virtue. The Inquisition tortured and killed not for pleasure, but for the salvation of souls. The French Revolution began as a cry for liberty and ended in the guillotine, with neighbors denouncing each other for insufficient zeal. Every totalitarian purge, whether under Stalin, Mao, or Pol Pot, was justified as cleansing. Society of traitors and enemies, with ordinary people recruited as informers, executioners, and judges. The same patterns repeat in our digital age. Online mobs descend on the accused, destroying reputations, livelihoods, and sometimes lives, all in the name of social justice or community standards. Do you remember a time when you saw someone cancelled, ostracized, or shamed into silence, not for what they had done, but for failing to match the group's current morality? Nietzsche saw this coming long before the internet. He warned of the danger when resentment, sentiment, is allowed to fester in the hearts of the weak and wounded. When victims are unable to act, their anger turns inward, festering into a hunger for punishment, for the chance to become judge and executioner. Nothing on earth consumes a man more quickly than the passion of resentment. When a group bonds around shared wounds, it is only a matter of time before it seeks to turn the tables, making the oppressor out of the oppressed. Moral fervor becomes the new license for cruelty. The good become the new persecutors. Modern examples abound. Online viral outrage campaigns turn into witch hunts. Hashtags fuel digital lynchings, where evidence, nuance, or even context no longer matter. Once the mob is convinced of its virtue, no voice of doubt is tolerated. In politics, purity tests and loyalty oaths force people to denounce friends, colleagues, even family. Those who hesitate are suspect. Those who question are enemies. The machinery of justice is turned into an engine of vengeance, and every victim is expected to join the hunt or risk becoming the next target. Even the language of empathy is weaponized. Those who express the wrong feelings or fail to display the proper outrage are treated as guilty by association. How can we tell the difference between true justice and blind conformity? Nietzsche's answer is ruthless. Distrust all in whom the impulse to punish is powerful. Real justice is slow, questioning, self-critical. It seeks to understand before it condemns, to protect the innocent before it punishes the guilty. Mob justice is the opposite. Quick, unreflective, intoxicated by the thrill of action and the comfort of the crowd. It demands loyalty, not truth. Confession, not inquiry. The more certain a group is of its righteousness, the more dangerous it becomes. So ask yourself, have you ever witnessed or experienced justice turned violent? Whether in history, in the news, or in your own life? What did it look like? An online pylon, a political purge, a family ostracism? How did you react? Do you think you could tell the difference between standing up for what's right and simply joining a hunt? Share your story in the comments. What signs do you look for to know when justice has become a mask for power? Do you ever worry that you, too, might be swept up in a righteous crusade without stopping to question it? Remember, the power to define truth and justice is the power to unleash violence in their names. Every age believes its cause is pure, its anger justified, its enemies subhuman. But history's greatest horrors began with crowds convinced they were saving the world. Are we so different today? Or are we just telling ourselves better stories? Maybe the only way to resist is to keep questioning, keep doubting, and remember that justice without humility is always just another mask for power. So, who's really writing your script? And whose side are you truly on? Why is it so easy to go along with the crowd and so hard to stand apart? The instinct to conform is older than civilization itself. In the wild, those who broke away from the tribe risked death by hunger, predators, or simple isolation. The group meant safety. The outsider meant danger. This deep evolutionary wiring still shapes us today. Even as our threats have changed from wild beasts to social exclusion, we inherit not only the urge to survive, but the urge to belong. From the moment we enter a classroom, a workplace, a digital community, the pressure is relentless. Fit in. Play your part. Don't make waves. Dissent is uncomfortable. Agreement is easy. The surest way to corrupt a youth, Nietzsche wrote, is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Why does conformity feel so good? Because it offers a kind of psychological comfort, a warm, soft blanket of sameness. You don't have to worry about being judged, attacked, or left out. The rules are clear, the roles assigned. When you say what everyone else says, the risk is almost zero. In this comfort, however, is a hidden cost, the slow death of critical thought. When we surrender our doubts for the reassurance of the group, our minds begin to atrophy. Thinking is hard, wrote Carl Jung. That's why most people judge. Judgment is quick, thought is slow. The crowd rewards quick judgments and punishes difficult questions. Over time, the instinct to question fades. We become spectators of our own beliefs, outsourcing our judgment to the majority. This mental laziness is not just an individual failing, but a collective disease. It explains how societies drift into disaster while everyone looks on. The history of the 20th century is littered with examples. The rise of totalitarianism in Germany, the Cultural Revolution in China, the collapse of financial bubbles, genocides that happened in plain sight. Each time, millions went along. Not because they were evil, but because it was easier to agree than to resist. The echo chamber effect amplifies this danger. In a homogeneous environment, ideas are recycled, dissent is suppressed, and the boundary between truth and illusion blurs. Everyone is sure, and everyone is wrong. The digital age has made this problem worse, not better. Social media, with its infinite scroll and instant validation, is the ultimate engine of groupthink. Memes, outrage, and slogans travel farther and faster than facts. Algorithms feed us what we already believe, turning difference into danger and making nuance invisible. One viral post can spark a cascade of mindless agreement. A million people clicking like, sharing, commenting, rarely pausing to ask if any of it is real. The result is a digital mob, united not by understanding, but by reflex. Case in point. How many times have you seen an obviously fake story explode across the internet, only to watch people double down even after the truth comes out? Think of the countless celebrity scandals that turn out to be misunderstandings, the viral medical cures later proven harmful, or the moral panics that hijack a news cycle and disappear when the next outrage arrives. Think, too, of the filter bubbles that split entire societies into warring camps, each convinced of its own righteousness, unable to see the other side as anything but evil. These aren't failures of information, they're the byproduct of our ancient urge to belong. The consequences of mindless conformity are everywhere. When you surrender your judgment, you surrender your freedom. When you silence your doubts, you silence your soul. In individuals, insanity is rare, Nietzsche observed. But in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. The death of thought is not dramatic. It is slow, silent, and almost invisible. It happens every time you click share without thinking. Every time you laugh along at the joke you know is cruel. Every time you nod rather than speak. In the end, you are no longer living. You are just echoing. But there are moments when the spell is broken. When you catch yourself drifting along, realize you have no idea why you believe what you do, and feel a stab of regret or shame. Maybe it was a time you joined a pile-on online, repeated a rumor, or supported a policy you didn't understand, just to stay safe. Maybe you woke up later, asked yourself, "What was I thinking?" and felt a cold shock of self-recognition. These moments are painful, but they are also precious. They are the first steps back to yourself. So, here's my question to you. When did you first realize you were just following the crowd? At school, at work, online, or somewhere else? Did you regret it? Did you change? Share your story in the comments. Do you think real independence is possible? Or are we all doomed to echo those around us? The more honest we are about our own moments of conformity, the more we can help each other escape the gravitational pull of the herd. Remember, comfort is cheap, but the price is high. If you want your mind to stay alive, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, to question, to stand alone, at least sometimes. The crowd may be warm, but only solitude can wake you up. Throughout history, the line between reason and madness has never been thinner than when a crowd becomes possessed by a single idea. Religious mania, nationalist fervor, political witch hunts. Each offers proof that a group, convinced of its righteousness, can spiral into violence, cruelty, and collective insanity. Why do ordinary people, who would never harm a neighbor, become monsters when swept up in a mass movement? The answer lies in the psychology of us versus them. When the world is divided into friends and enemies, believers and heretics, patriots and traitors, the complexity of the individual vanishes. All that remains is the tribe, the cause, and the sacred mission. It is in this intoxicating atmosphere that crowds commit their greatest sins. believing all the while that they are saving the world. Religious history is filled with such examples. The Crusades, justified as holy wars, unleashed centuries of slaughter in the name of God. The Inquisition tortured and burned, not out of hatred, but to purify society. Even today, extremist sects manipulate faith to command absolute obedience and justify the most barbaric acts. But fanaticism is not confined to religion. The 20th century saw the rise of nationalist movements that turned neighbors into executioners. Fascist regimes mobilized entire populations to destroy scapegoats. Jews, minorities, dissidents, promising a utopia if only the enemy could be eliminated. Genocides in Rwanda, the Balkans, and elsewhere were not spontaneous eruptions of violence, but orchestrated frenzies fueled by propaganda and a sense of belonging. Modern society likes to believe it is immune to such madness, but the reality is more troubling. Extremism has found new forms. Online cults, conspiracy groups, and radical movements spreading through encrypted apps and anonymous forums. The internet, once imagined as a utopia of free thought, now serves as an amplifier for the wildest voices. Communities form around the strangest beliefs: flat earth, anti-vaccine crusades, QAnon, or cult-like financial schemes, offering identity, purpose, and enemies to hate. Algorithms reward outrage, bots spread disinformation, and echo chambers turn skepticism into heresy. Suddenly, the boundary between reality and fantasy is lost, and the crowd goes mad together, to use Nietzsche's words. Psychologists call this process de-individuation, the loss of self-awareness in a group. Mob mentality erases doubt and multiplies emotion. A sense of anonymity, coupled with the intoxicating approval of the crowd, frees people to say and do what they never would alone. In online communities, this can mean the viral harassment of strangers, coordinated attacks, or the explosive spread of hoaxes and violence. We are pure. They are evil. All restraint is abandoned. The tribe must prevail. Consider recent cases: extremist groups recruiting young people through gaming chats and message boards, cult-like business schemes promising salvation through loyalty, political rallies escalating into riots, or AI-driven manipulation swaying public opinion in ways few people even notice. Even mainstream society is vulnerable. See how quickly public opinion can be whipped into a frenzy by news stories, manipulated images, or clever slogans. Think of how cancel culture can go from righteous correction to relentless mobbing overnight. Or how peaceful protests sometimes turn violent when the group's energy flips from hope to rage. What makes people lose their minds in groups? It's rarely just ideology, more often it's emotion. Anger, fear, humiliation, or the ecstasy of belonging. Leaders, whether demagogues or influencers, exploit these feelings to bind the crowd and direct it at a target. The enemy can be real or imaginary. What matters is the bond of hatred, the rush of certainty, the thrill of action without responsibility. Have you ever witnessed or been caught up in a collective frenzy? Online, in politics, in religion, or anywhere else? Did you recognize it at the time or only afterward? Share your experience in the comments. What do you think makes a group lose its mind? Is it fear, hope, boredom, or just the human need to belong? Have you ever felt yourself swept along, doing or saying things you'd never imagine alone? Let's talk honestly about what it takes to stay sane and free. When the world around us is losing its head, remember, every age has its madness, and every crowd believes it is different. But the human heart has not changed. Only the forms of frenzy have evolved, and the tools for spreading it have grown stronger. The more we understand the mechanics of mass hysteria, the better chance we have to resist it. Ask yourself, when everyone around you is shouting, do you dare to whisper? Or do you join the chant? Sometimes, sanity is simply the courage to stand apart. Why is independent thinking so rare and so costly? Because to truly think for yourself is to accept exile from comfort, from certainty, and often from the crowd. The rebel, the skeptic, the questioner, these are not celebrated by society but tolerated at best and destroyed at worst. Every age loves the myth of the free thinker, but in practice, it fears the disruption they bring. To challenge the group's certainties is to risk social death. Friends turn away, opportunities vanish, and the machine of public opinion begins to grind. The crowd may forgive almost anything except the crime of refusing to echo its beliefs. For every Galileo, there are 1,000 forgotten dissenters, mocked, fired, shadow banned, or simply ignored into silence. In the digital age, the dangers are both ancient and new. Algorithms filter out uncomfortable voices. Online mobs punish heresy with shaming, doxing, or blacklisting. Even economic systems reward conformity. The loudest critics rarely hold positions of power for long. The price of saying no is paid in loneliness, lost connections, and sometimes in safety or livelihood itself. But why is it so lonely? Because independent thought demands you leave the safety of agreement to risk misunderstanding, conflict, and the endless labor of doubt. To be awake is to see what others ignore, to refuse easy answers even when they promise belonging. He who has a why to live, wrote Nietzsche, can bear almost any how. But what if your why is not shared and your how is isolation? The history of progress is the history of outsiders, those who questioned, suffered, and persisted. Socrates was forced to drink poison for corrupting the youth. Giordano Bruno was burned for heresy. Dissidents everywhere pay the price of thinking aloud. In modern times, whistleblowers and innovators face smear campaigns, lawsuits, and permanent exclusion. Even on a small scale, in families or workplaces, the troublemaker is usually the one who refuses to keep quiet. How do you cultivate true critical power in a world that wants easy agreement? It starts with small acts of courage, asking questions no one wants to answer, admitting when you don't know, seeking out voices that challenge your own. It means tolerating discomfort, sitting with uncertainty, and practicing skepticism not as cynicism, but as care for the truth. Real awakening is not a pose, but a discipline. Reading widely, listening deeply, refusing to join mobs. It means, above all, accepting that you may lose things, friends, status, peace of mind, but gain something no crowd can offer, the dignity of your own mind. So, I want to hear from you. How much are you willing to sacrifice for honest, independent thought? Have you ever paid a price, large or small, for speaking out, asking questions, or refusing to conform? What happened, and how did you deal with it? Share your story in the comments. Do you believe a society can truly value independent thinkers, or is loneliness the price of real freedom? The more openly we speak of these costs, the more we empower each other to bear them. Remember, to be awake is to be alone. Sometimes, but not always. The crowd changes, but the need for courage does not. In a world of echo chambers, the rarest voice is the one that still whispers, "Why?" Loneliness is almost always spoken of as a curse, a sign of failure, exile, or defeat. But Nietzsche, perhaps more than any other philosopher, dared to see loneliness as a sacred space, the crucible of true growth, the price and privilege of becoming oneself. In a world obsessed with connection and belonging, he wrote, "I love those who do not know how to live, except by going under, for they are those who cross over." And in his sharpest aphorism, he declares, "I love him whose soul is so overfull that he forgets himself, and all things are in him. Thus all things become his going under." For Nietzsche, loneliness is not isolation for its own sake, but the necessary emptiness from which creation is born. It is the desert you must cross to reach the mountain, the silence in which new values can be heard. The one who never leaves the herd, who never stands apart, never learns what it is to be truly alive. What happens in this desert? You meet yourself, stripped of the comfort of consensus, the noise of others' desires. For most, this is unbearable, but for the few who persist, it becomes a forge for the will. History is rich with lonely victors, Van Gogh painting in poverty and madness, Kafka writing to no audience but himself, Marie Curie laboring in obscurity, Nietzsche himself wandering alone through Europe, rejected by friends, lovers, and his own age. In the end, it is often the solitary who invent the new language, the new vision, the new way of life. The world will later adopt. Their pain is real, but so is their power. Why is creativity so closely linked to loneliness? Because to create is to go where no one else has gone, to think what no one else has dared, to endure misunderstanding, doubt, and even ridicule. The herd rewards comfort and imitation. The solitary, by necessity, must build from scratch. In solitude, the mind is forced to listen to its own music, to question every rule, to invent new ways of seeing. It is no accident that the greatest leaps in art, science, and philosophy so often come from those living on the margins. But Nietzsche did not romanticize loneliness as endless suffering. He saw it as a passage, not a destination, a test, not a sentence. The goal is not to remain forever apart, but to return to the world stronger, more whole, and able to give back what was found in the darkness. The higher we soar, he reminds us, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. The lonely path is not for everyone. Most will never take it, and many who do will turn back. But for those who endure, loneliness becomes not a wound, but a womb, a space where the next self, the next world, is waiting to be born. So, what is your own experience of loneliness? Was it emptiness or revelation? Punishment or possibility? Did it leave you weaker, or did it carve out a space for something new? The more honestly we confront the reality of solitude, the more we realize loneliness is not a failure. Sometimes it is the only real victory. What does it mean to become your own lawgiver? To be the one who writes the rules for your life, instead of merely following the scripts handed down by others. For Nietzsche, self-legislation is the highest and hardest achievement. It's not the cold withdrawal of the hermit or the arrogance of the tyrant. Instead, it is the courage to look within, question everything, and forge values that are truly your own, no matter how much they differ from those of your family, your society, or even your former self. Become who you are, Nietzsche commands, is the most difficult thing in the world. Why? Because to do so means stepping into the unknown, bearing the full weight of your choices, and accepting that you alone are responsible for what your life becomes. The path of inner legislation begins with radical doubt. Question every inherited belief. What if my idea of success, goodness, or happiness is not really mine, but a relic of someone else's expectations? Why do I fear what I fear, desire what I desire, believe what I believe? The self-legislator is relentless in this inquiry, willing to tear down comfortable illusions for the sake of something more authentic. But doubt alone is not enough. You must become a selective absorber, filtering the endless messages from culture, family, media, and peers. Take only what resonates with your deepest instincts, your most honest intuitions. Reject the rest, even if it means disappointing others or standing alone. This process is not an act of rebellion for its own sake, but an ongoing construction of meaning that fits your unique existence. Then comes the hard part: choice. To create your own law is to say yes to certain possibilities and no to many others. Every choice is a boundary, a line drawn in the chaos of potential. It is also an act of responsibility. The self-legislator cannot blame fate, tradition, or the crowd for their outcomes. Freedom, in this sense, is not a privilege, but a burden. One that few are willing to carry. Freedom is the will to be responsible for ourselves, Nietzsche reminds us. The world will tempt you to pass the weight to someone else, to hide in the safety of consensus, to let your life be managed by rules you never questioned. But each step you take as your own legislator is a declaration of sovereignty, a refusal to be defined by accident or authority. Of course, the world does not make this easy. Society rewards conformity and punishes deviation. Families may pressure you to fulfill their dreams, not yours. Cultures erect invisible walls around what is acceptable, admirable, or normal. To become your own legislator is to face the loneliness of difference, the risk of being misunderstood, judged, even rejected. But what is the alternative? To live a borrowed life, always second-guessing yourself, measuring your worth by someone else's yardstick? Nietzsche's challenge is blunt. No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Yet self-legislation is not a one-time achievement, but a continual process. As you grow, so must your laws. What worked at one stage of life may become a prison at the next. The self-legislator is always revising, adapting, learning from mistakes, and daring to start again. This is not weakness, but strength. The refusal to let yesterday's truth become tomorrow's dogma. One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star, says Nietzsche. The law you create today may be the foundation you outgrow tomorrow. What matters is not perfection, but the relentless honesty to keep becoming. Have you ever felt this drive to set your own terms? To question, to choose, to accept responsibility, even when it made you an outsider? Share your story in the comments. When was the last time you wrote your own law, even in a small way? Do you want to define your life by your own standards? Or do you sometimes wish for the comfort of a ready-made path? How do you balance the pressure of family, culture, or social norms with your need for authenticity? What's the hardest part of being your own legislator? Remember, the world is full of borrowed lives and recycled dreams. The rarest achievement is to become the author of your own story, the legislator of your own values. It will cost you certainty, maybe relationships, sometimes even peace. But what you gain is beyond measure. The dignity of being truly yourself, and the power to shape a life that is worthy of your own spirit. What does it really mean to be free? For most people, freedom is little more than the ability to act without interference, to follow whims, satisfy desires, break rules at will. But this is the shallowest illusion. Freedom, in its deepest sense, is not about doing whatever you please, but about discovering the power to direct your own life, consciously, deliberately, and with full acceptance of every consequence. Freedom is the will to be responsible to ourselves, Nietzsche writes. It's not the license to evade duty or flee from limits, but the courage to make a law for yourself, to obey it, and to bear whatever it brings. True liberty is the sovereignty of the self, not the chaos of unrestrained appetite. Many confuse following your heart with freedom, but are you really free if you cannot say no to your own impulses? Are you free if every mood or craving commands you? If every fear keeps you in check? If every social wind blows you off course? Nietzsche saw that most people are free only in name, slaves to routines, desires, and expectations they never chose. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded, he warns. True freedom begins not with rebellion against others, but with mastery over oneself. This is why the path to freedom always runs through struggle. Struggle with your own weakness, with inherited ideas, with the relentless pull of comfort and conformity. It means daring to ask, what do I truly want? What values will I serve? Even when no one is watching, where am I still living someone else's script, calling it my own? Most people never ask these questions, or when they do, they flinch from the answers. It is easier to blend in, to settle for borrowed meaning, to let the world decide what matters. But freedom that costs nothing is worth nothing. Yet, transcending society does not mean running away or rejecting the world in bitterness. The awakened individual still participates in life, works, loves, suffers, creates, but no longer needs the approval or permission of the collective. Social norms are seen as useful conventions, not commandments from on high. The group can no longer define your worth. Because you have learned to weigh yourself, you see the crowd's drama, its shifting values, its need for conformity, and you no longer tremble before its judgment. This is not isolation, but a new kind of participation, a dance with the world, led by your own steps. There is a paradox here. The more you transcend the need for belonging, the more deeply you can relate to others, because you approach them not as competitors for validation, but as fellow travelers, each on their own quest for meaning. External conflict is inevitable. Society will always try to pull you back, to shame or seduce you into conformity. Sometimes this means real loss of status, relationships, or security, but inwardly, you are free. Because you are living on your own terms. Nietzsche knew this path was hard. The world wants sameness, and those who refuse to mirror it are often misunderstood, feared, or even hated. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly, he wrote. The price of true freedom is often loneliness, misunderstanding, and the risk of failure. But the reward is incomparable. The deep, steady strength of a person who no longer needs to ask for permission to be themselves. This is not an argument for selfishness or cold detachment. The truly free person is not cut off from love, friendship, or community. In fact, only someone who is no longer desperate for approval can give freely and honestly to others. When you are no longer chained to the need for praise or acceptance, your relationships become gifts, not transactions. You can listen without fear, speak without calculation, and walk away when something asks you to betray your own value. Though, what is the awakened person's relationship to society? Outwardly, there may be conflict. You may lose friends, endure criticism, or be forced to stand alone. But inwardly, there is peace, a reconciliation with the world on your own terms. The awakened person no longer asks, "Do they love me?" but "Am I true to myself?" This is the quiet revolution Nietzsche imagined, not the overthrow of governments, but the liberation of the spirit, one person at a time. Have you ever tasted even a moment of this freedom? Have you acted, spoken, or chosen in a way that risked rejection, but felt deep down that you could finally breathe? Or are you still searching for the courage to step beyond the need for approval, to let the world be what it is, while you become what you must? Share your story, your struggles, your victories in the comments. What does freedom mean to you, and what are you willing to lose for it? Remember, the world will always tempt you with the comfort of the herd, the easy safety of being like everyone else. But nothing is more precious than the dignity of living by your own law, no matter the cost. True freedom is not found in rebellion alone, but in the strength to be at peace with yourself, regardless of the world's applause or its scorn. Nietzsche's final warning to our age is as urgent as ever. Do not trust any truth simply because it is handed to you. Do not surrender your mind to ready-made justice or your heart to manufactured belonging. Every system, every institution, every collective has a story to sell, a narrative of good and evil, of right and wrong, of who you must be in order to be accepted. These stories are powerful because they promise comfort, a place to stand, a group to shield you, a cause to die for. But Nietzsche insists that every such comfort comes at a price: the slow death of your independent spirit. Spiritual awakening is not just an act of rebellion against external authority. It is the deeper work of reclaiming your own power, the courage to ask why, and the humility to answer, "I do not know." It is learning to stand alone when you must, to belong only when it does not cost your soul. The world needs more solitary thinkers, more independent creators, more people willing to suffer misunderstanding for the sake of honesty. Yet, our society, for all its talk of individuality, still mistrusts those who walk alone. The lone voice is often dismissed as arrogant, dangerous, or simply strange. But every age's renewal comes from its outsiders, from those who refuse to repeat what everyone else is saying. Today, as power becomes more diffuse and invisible, and truth is shaped by algorithms and popular opinion, Nietzsche's challenge is sharper than ever. Dare to question everything. Dare to live as your own authority, to risk misunderstanding and loneliness, to become the source of meaning in your own life. The path will not be easy. You will meet resistance. From friends, from strangers, from within. The herd will always try to call you back with the promise of safety and approval. So now, as you stand at this threshold, ask yourself, are you ready to step away from the comfort of the crowd and claim the risk and the freedom of not belonging to any collective? Or does the warmth of the group still call to you? Share your answer and your reasoning in the comments. Do you believe that true independence is possible or even desirable? What have you gained or lost in your journey toward selfhood? Remember, awakening is not a final destination, but a daily act of courage. There is no script to follow, no authority to obey but your own honest mind. Nietzsche's hope and his challenge is that some will choose the harder path, to live not as echoes, but as originals. The world will always need more of those